Okay, everybody, hi. My name is Scott Shaw, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 11th of 2006. My home group is Foundation for Hope Group. We meet every Tuesday night at 7:30. We're an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we meet in Decatur, Tennessee. So if you're ever in the geographical area of Sweetwater, Tennessee, that's a little bit more well known. Please come and see us on a Tuesday night. We'd love to have you join us. So, like I said, my sobriety date is March of 2006. I was raised in Fort Myers, Florida. That's where I got sober. That's where I started this journey in recovery. Probably, just going back, rewinding, I grew up in a good home. I had a good family with good morals. And, I believe, dysfunction probably runs rampant in my family, but that's just kind of the thing is, I see us all as spiritually sick children of God. I've still got dysfunction. I think I'm still on a journey to functioning better as I continue to learn and grow in this program and in my recovery. So, I look at it, I was very fortunate. I grew up in a home where we went to church every Sunday. We went every Wednesday. I actually ended up going to school where we went to church. So I had a lot of very strong religious upbringing. And somewhere along that line, very early on, I had the perception that this God knew everything about me, and had a lot of different rules, which I really wanted to try to follow. But by the time I got about 12 or 13 years old, it seemed like a lot of those rules were things that I wanted to do. I didn't want to follow those rules anymore. I don't know where that rebellious nature came along, but it certainly was there. And I was breaking every rule that I felt that God had, and I was upsetting God. That's again my perception. That's where I was at the time. And so I found alcohol right around that 12, 13-year-old period. The magical thing that happened for me with alcohol is I had no idea how wrong I felt inside until I drank alcohol. Right. That is, as I had a couple of drinks of alcohol, I remember feeling as though that I could talk to older people and have a conversation. I wasn't as afraid. I felt as though that I could do anything. I felt I could fight, I could dance, I could just do anything. And I remember feeling at an early age that this is how I'm supposed to feel. So there's something that happened right there in my mind that said, when you're not feeling like this, you're feeling like you shouldn't feel. And when you are feeling like this, you're feeling like you should feel. So that's a dangerous thing to have happen to you at an early age, or at least it was for me. So I didn't drink all the time, but I experimented with all kinds of outside issues all the way through my teens. I'll go about to 16 years old. I remember having this Datsun station wagon, and I had removed the spare tire. It was a hatchback, and the spare tire was in the trunk area, but pretty easily accessible from the inside of the vehicle. And I replaced the spare tire area with a homemade type of cooler, so I could keep ice and beer in this cooler, driving all around town, and finding a place to pull over and drink a beer at 16 years old. I remember at 17 being fine. I wanted to go on a deer hunting trip with my dad and grandfather so bad, and I was getting poor grades, and my father had said if I would get straight A's for a quarter, I could go on this trip. So I got straight A's, of course, and I went on this trip. And I was allowed to drive from Fort Myers, Florida to Battle Creek, Michigan, by myself. And I had a cooler I had made with all kinds of Cokes and chips and sandwiches on the top layer. And underneath all that, I had a bunch of beer. So, these are kind of things I look back in hindsight and go, wow, yeah. And when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous at 33 years old, I really felt I didn't have a problem with alcohol. I felt my problem was a lot of other things, and perhaps outside issues that, but it wasn't alcohol. I didn't know at that time, and this is what I see today as a result of going through this process and having a spiritual awakening as the result of these 12 steps, that was my alcoholism trying to protect its future right to drink. It's astonishing how my mind, as a chronic, hopeless variety alcoholic, otherwise hopeless, outside of a spiritual experience, will come up with amazing ideas to tell me that my problem that I really have is not my problem. And I find out here that my problem really isn't alcohol. My problem is an internal turmoil that I feel without alcohol. When I would have alcohol, that internal turmoil would go away. So that was really my solution to the internal turmoil. So the internal turmoil, better known in the program, some of you that may be familiar, called the spiritual malady, that was my issue coming in here. But I did not know that, and that required me to find a sponsor and someone that had some experience kind of guide me through this process, through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, to even become aware of that. I just knew that everybody else on the planet was telling me, hey, man, you got a problem with alcohol. Hey, you got a problem with alcohol. You shouldn't drink as much. Man, you should really taper off. You should slow down. You shouldn't go full throttle like you do. You really get out of hand. All these things I was hearing. And when in my mind, alcohol was the solution to it. They were trying to tell me it was the problem. The people that loved me and the people who were rowdy friends. And I remember, I would shed friendships, and I would just leave various groups of friends and find new groups of friends as my illness. And I think, I just look at that as my alcoholic illness trying to continue to tell me that, well, I'm not as bad as them. So if I started getting as bad as them, I would find a completely new set of them to be around. So, I could tell myself I wasn't as bad as them. There's many different things that I tried. I tried a geographical cure just before my 21st birthday. And I remember being at my 21st birthday, somehow wandering into Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and not knowing what happened after a very short period at a bar celebrating my 21st birthday, but waking up in the early morning hours with a knock on the window to my automobile. And somehow I had backed up and backed my back bumper up to a stop sign. So obviously on the wrong side of the road, backed up to a stop sign. A couple of officers were knocking on my window, asking what I was doing there. And when they asked me to roll down my window, and as soon as I did, whoa, wow, boy, what a smell of alcohol. And they said, blow in this for me. And they had me blow in this tube, and I pretended like I was trying to blow in it and puffed my cheeks up. And they caught on to that real quick and said, hey, come on, kid, blow in this thing. And then they said, I remember the one officer saying to his partner, hey, do you see how high this level is at this time in the morning? I had a lot of different indicators like that. But I had remembered at some point trying to, or having heard to put your keys in the passenger seat if you ever stop, and so you don't get a DUI. So I had done that. And evidently, they said if I had not put my keys in the passenger seat, I would have gotten a DUI. I remember, I kind of think of like Jeff Foxworthy jokes with some of this stuff. Like, you might be an alcoholic if you have ever practiced sobriety tests while drinking. In case you get pulled over, you might be an alcoholic. Those are things that I did. I practiced the various sobriety tests so that I could pass them inebriated and not get in trouble. And effectively, I guess they worked. I never got a DUI, but I got pulled over multiple times. And that didn't help me at all, because that just gave me the idea that somehow I was a little bit above everybody else and I could get away with this more. Fast forward a little bit, I came back to Florida. I stayed in Michigan just for about a year. And I came back to Florida. My drinking was really, I wouldn't say it was totally out of control, but it wasn't every day. Let's put it that way. I think that's really important to mention because, I thought I had pictured what an alcoholic was. And an alcoholic was somebody that had to drink every day. And they, quite frankly, lived under the bridge where I like to fish. And since I didn't fit that mental profile of that person, I wasn't an alcoholic. The book talks about, it's astonishing how many of us pursue this idea that we're not bodily and mentally different from our fellows. And that kills a lot of alcoholics. Many of us pursue that into the gates of insanity or death. And that is exactly unknowingly what I was doing. My alcoholic illness in my mind was creating all these excuses and reasons why I was different, these reservations and these ideas, these lurking notions that someday, somehow, I would control and enjoy my drinking. You know, I had a friend, we were going back through the steps. We like to do that periodically. And he pointed out that that is insanity because never did I control and enjoy my drinking. I was either controlling my drinking and not enjoying it, or I was enjoying my drinking. It was completely out of control. And we both had a laugh because that was certainly both of our experiences. You know, I came back to Florida and I very quickly met my wife, that is still my wife today, by the grace of God. And, you know, I had all these different ideas that, you know, if I got a good job, it would slow down my drinking. If I got married, if I had children, that would slow down my drinking. I've seen a lot of people, friendships from high school and things that these occurrences had happened in their lives and it, you know, slowed them down. And I just thought that I was finally going to figure out the magic combination to straightening this out, controlling and enjoying my drinking. But never, ever did I think that I would ever live the rest of my life without alcohol. That was an idea that I couldn't even conceive of. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous by the age of 33, and you know, I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous, so I'm not going to really go into detail, but I did for quite a few years there had found an outside issue that helped me marathon drink in rapid succession for days on end, and I would come up missing for days, 2 to 3 days at a time. And I would come out of those things with a lot of remorse, kind of like it says in the doctor's opinion, over remorseful, with a firm, you know, swearing it off forever, never going to drink again, swear on the Holy Bible, that kind of stuff, tears running down my face. And if I would have been hooked up to a lie detector test, I would have passed it. And I would have passed it every time that I said it. And the times that I've said it were so numerous, they're countless. I can't tell you how many times I said that, but each time I believed it. But a little bit of time would go by, and the best way that I can explain what happened is there was an inner pressure in me, and my head began to swell with all the different things that I had either the bridges I had burnt behind me, the things that I had left undone, all the worries and cares. I had quit filing taxes, for example, just all kinds of things. That each one of those things, they just seemed to be swirling around in my mind, creating this carbonation that was getting ready to explode and just continue to expand and expand. And I would, you know, the only thing that ever made that go away was changing the way that I felt with alcohol. That instantly would make that carbonation settle down almost as if it was a pressure release valve. And nothing ever seemed to do that. Nothing else I'd ever found. I felt very guilty and full of remorse. I had some kind of idea that drinking was immoral, even, and I thought, you know, and I was continuing to do it and getting worse and worse. And I would go down to altars and pray and say, you know, God, please take this from me. And I would see that this apparently happened for other people, but it wasn't happening for me. So I really, in my mind, the perception was God just knows that I'm a lost case. And I really felt like that. So when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I really, at 33 years old, and I seen those steps on the wall, I seen the God in there, turning your life and your will over to the care of God. And I thought, this thing's about God. They're not going to be able to teach me anything I don't already know about God. I'll probably be able to teach them a little bit more than maybe most of them know. That was my attitude. I'm so grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, on the beginning of that journey, we got to a place in the first step that said, in the more about alcoholism, where it said, if we plan to stop drinking, there must be no reservation nor any lurking notion that we'll ever be immune to alcohol. And I remember my sponsor asking me, he said, Scott, what's your reservation? What's your lurking notion? And like any good sponsee, my response was, oh no, I don't have a reservation. I don't have a lurking notion. He said, well, Scott, if you're an alcoholic like we are, you probably have a reservation and lurking notion, probably both of them. And I said, no. And he kind of described that a reservation, at least this was his description, there was some way, somehow, that I may feel different. Because if I feel different, I may not have to apply all the things that all 12 steps or all components of it. Maybe I'm a little bit too young. I'm a little younger than a lot of other people out there. I come from a different background. I've got a little religious training. It could be just a number, a countless ad infinitum number of things that could make me feel just a little bit different. My disease of alcoholism will try to give me those things to keep me from, therefore, non-alcoholic. It talks about that and more about alcoholism in the book, and I really like that, where it says, despite all we could say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe that they are in this class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule. Problem with that is I didn't even know I was doing it. I had no idea. I don't feel that I was doing that on the conscious level. That was going on in me, but that was really, I look at it as my illness of alcoholism, the mental component, or trying to protect its future right to drink, knowing that somewhere deep down subconsciously, that was the only remedy for my problems that I had ever known. And I couldn't imagine a life without being able to go back to that remedy if crap really hit the fan. That's the best way I can put it. I didn't know that was happening in me, and I really didn't think that I had too much of a problem. The lurking notion he described was, some kind of picture where I picture myself in the future, perhaps drinking safely or without consequence. And I said I didn't have that, and I really believe that I didn't. And that he asked me to go home that week and look and really try to investigate if I had one of those. And I remember just drifting off in a daydream that week, seeing myself on a golf course on the ninth hole with a 3.5 beer buzz, with the thought that I was 20 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had just the perfect amount of alcohol. I didn't want any more, and I didn't want any less. It was a perfect day, 60 degrees, not a cloud in the sky, no humidity, just like I like it, perfect day. And I could finally control and enjoy my drinking. Kind of like if you're thinking about drinking 20 years before the event, you might be an alcoholic. These things are not normal, but I didn't know that they were not normal. I had nothing to compare it to. I like to always say that I would literally have to have a brain transplant for a moment, with a non-alcoholic in order to find that there was anything different in my thinking. So my thinking was the only thinking that there ever was, so I thought it was perfectly normal. I've heard it said, only an insane person thinks that everybody else is insane and they're normal. Well, that was me. That's the best, that's a good description of it. But finding that picture and actually remembering what my sponsor said that shocked me, that I had that picture. And I realized at that moment that I had the alcoholic mind, that this thing was happening in me, and it was that was abnormal. And we talked about that. And, that really helped me concede to my innermost self. And I really believe today, I look back on that concession to my innermost self, concede. And I love that word because the definition means to admit something is true or valid after first resisting or denying it. What a beautiful word in the placement of that spot where it says, this is the first step in recovery. That I could no longer bamboozle myself to think that I was not bodily and mentally different from my fellows, that I didn't have a spiritual malady going on, or that I could control and enjoy this drinking thing, or somehow someday I would figure out the right combination to live happy and have alcohol. That was never going to happen. And I actually went through what's the best way to put a process after that of where I was really mourning the loss of my best friend. That's the best way I can put it. I was mourning the idea that I was never going to be able to drink again. But I also knew that I was never not going to be able to drink again. And I was really afraid. But I was assured by my sponsor that if I would take these steps and work them as they were laid out in the big book, Program of Action, the Design for Living in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, that I would have this psychic change, this spiritual awakening, a total perception shift. I love the description that it is in the book, and there is a solution between the conversation of Roland Hazard and Carl Jung. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes that were once the guiding forces in the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions began to dominate them. That's what happened for me. But here's the clincher about it. I couldn't make that happen for me. No doctor could have made that happen for me. No well-meaning clergyman could have made that happen for me. No psychiatrist could have made that happen for me. No frantic wife could have made that happen for me. No well-meaning family member could have made that happen for me. And I certainly couldn't have made that happen for me. But the strangest thing that happened to me was I simply followed some things that didn't make any sense to me and made me extremely uncomfortable. And this process began to happen for me. To me today, this is still a miracle, and I still don't understand its inner workings. I just know that there is a power greater than myself at work here that completely altered me and changed me. And I'm gonna describe some of that. When I got into my fourth step and I started looking at, I couldn't wait to write down the resentments and tell my sponsor about all the dirty, rotten things that all you people in this world had done to me. And finally, someone was going to listen to me. And, I started to write these down. And I remember I gave him a list of about 8 things. And when I handed that to him, he threw it back at me. And I always like to say, then I had 9 because I put my sponsor in there, of course, after that. But he threw it back at me and said, Scott, you're so bitter and full of anger and resentment and rage. And it comes out in just the way you talk, that this isn't even scratching the surface. And I'm so grateful for the people in Alcoholics Anonymous that have experience to carry this message. He started probing me and asking me questions like, Scott, have you ever been on the wrong side of town, the wrong time of night? You ever been robbed? I said, yeah, I have. He said, were you happy about it? I said, well, of course not. He goes, it upset you pretty bad, didn't you? Oh, yeah, I was upset. Did you know their name? I said, no. He said, put down people that robbed me, And he pointed out that nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty, and those words were right in there. By the time he was done with me picking all this stuff out of me, I had over 200 entries. Now, I can tell you, I wouldn't have put that much down had I known that I was going to have to pray over each and every entry. But I'm so grateful for this process. And I just want to share a little experience that happened to me, a big aha moment. And I feel like my recovery has been characterized by countless, or a lot of, I shouldn't say countless, just a very high number of spiritual experiences that have culminated into a spiritual awakening. And I believe that I'm still awakening. I don't think that that's ever supposed to stop happening. I think this is part of the journey for us to continue to awaken. At least that's been my experience, and I'm so grateful for that. But this was a really large, and I can look back in my sobriety and see some really large moves and changes where those ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were kind of shifted. And I was praying over one of my worst resentments, and my sponsor would periodically check in with me, and I'd have to call him each day, and he'd say, how you doing on that really tough resentment? I'd say, I'm doing good. He said, you see where you've been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate, or afraid? And I'd say, yeah, but they, and he'd say, keep praying, hang up. As soon as I'd say, yeah, but they, he'd hang up on me and say, keep praying. And I thought, what is this going to do? And I just kept praying. And, God teaches me in pictures and videos. I'm a visual learner, perhaps. I don't know. But I know that what I got was I was kind of drifting off into a daydream. And I seen this small child. And he was a little boy. And he was probably around the 4 or 5 year age. Big, beautiful, crystal blue eyes. No hair. And he was gray and looked very frail and atrophied. And I thought to myself, my God, I would do anything to help this little child. I would just, if the doctor came in and said he needs a kidney transplant and you're a match, I would have given him the kidney. And I'd have said, put me under, doc, take my kidney, give it to this kid. Yet I walked over there. And again, this isn't a daydream, just drifted off into this as I was praying this prayer. Multiple times, by the way, this didn't just happen right away. I prayed this I countless times. And I went to put my hand on this little boy's shoulder. And as I did, he started to throw up and it got on my shoes. And I jumped back and cocked my fist back and I started screaming vulgarities at this little boy. And inside I was screaming out, oh my God, please make this stop. I would never do this. Why am I seeing this? I would never treat a little sick boy like this. My God, please make it stop. And those of you unfamiliar, in the prayer, it says, God, help me to realize that the people who I felt wronged me were perhaps spiritually sick. Though I did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed me, they, like myself, are sick too. Help me. I'm asking God at that point to help me show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Save me from being angry. Thy will, not mine, be done. What happened was it was as if I'm screaming out to God, please make this stop. I don't know why I'm seeing this. And it was like somebody hit a pause button in a video. And a great thought came into my mind. This is exactly how I treat God's spiritually sick children every time they disturb me in some way. And let me tell you, at that moment, it flip-flopped upside down. I could see my spiritual sickness with clarity, and the dishonesty of selfishness, inconsideration, and the way that I treated people, and all driven by fear and all this stuff I was never able to see before. And instantly I could see their part and just totally disregard their part, realizing that they were that little spiritually sick boy. And I was also that little spiritually sick boy. And everybody I'd ever met and ever will meet is that spiritually sick little child of God. That had a huge, huge impact on me to this day. It's literally transformed me, metamorphosized me into a different person. The way that I see life, see this world, my attitude, and towards God, towards life, everything. And these words are in the book. This is precisely what happened to me in that moment. I fast forwarding along through some of the other steps, I get into this ninth step, and I had a very scary thing that I had to go make right, and I was extremely afraid. And we followed the instruction in the book, and it said that I needed to consult the people that may be affected. And I spoke with my wife, and I spent a lot of time in prayer, just like is pointed out in the big book. I love one of the prayers in the ninth step where I ask God to help me to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. Give me the strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. See, I had a sponsor that really believed in putting the prayers into action, that this was part of the action plan in the program of recovery. These things are not in there as, something that is optional. He didn't put it to be that way. He put that if I follow this precisely, that I would then have the spiritual awakening. I would then have the promises that are pointed out on page 83, the ninth step promises, and the 10th step promises, and the fifth step promises. And there's a promise even in the fourth step, right after that prayer, that I didn't catch till a couple of years ago. And I love that one. It says, we cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show you how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. And that's precisely what happened to me. But it didn't happen to me before I prayed that multiple times. That was a result of me taking the action. I didn't think it would work. I didn't feel like doing it. I didn't believe it. It didn't matter. All I had to do was do it. Once I did it, that's when the things began to happen. That's when those results and those promises started to come true for me. And in my experience, I believe that even in this phase of my recovery right now, if I'm painstaking about this phase of my recovery, I'm going to be amazed before I'm halfway through with this phase of my recovery. Right now, I'm going to know a new freedom on a new level. I'm going to know a new happiness on a new level. This has been my experience, and I feel that this is the way that this process is supposed to be. Now, am I sitting here telling you that it's all going to be rainbows and butterflies? No. I've had some really rough goes in my recovery. At 6 years sober, my sponsor died suddenly in a motorcycle accident. I felt like a fledgling just being pushed out of a nest with not knowing what to do. My best friend in recovery died at that time, very within a year window. And my grandfather, which was kind of the spiritual patriarch of our entire family, and I had an extremely close relationship, died. The three most influential people in my life died. And right at that same time, something happened to a family member of mine that shouldn't have happened. At least I felt that it shouldn't have happened. And I copped a really big resentment to the point where I was wanting to physically harm someone. Even after having this beautiful experience back in step 4, I can still get sick real quick. I remember something that my sponsor said early on. He said, Scott, every day of your life while you're in this program, you're either in recovery or you're in relapse. And just because you haven't taken the drink doesn't mean you're not in relapse. You're either in spiritual recovery or you're in spiritual relapse. And if you're in spiritual relapse, you're headed for physical relapse. And I'm so grateful for a sponsor that told me the truth and showed me the way and made me follow this stuff precisely. Got me involved in service early on in my recovery. It drugged me to detox and treatment centers, made me go to committee meetings and district meetings, made me become a GSR for my group. There was no volunteer, it was voluntold for me. That's how it worked for me. And thank God that this thing, a person had enough experience and wherewithal within them to care more about my character development than they did my feelings. I was pissed off at this guy 90% of the time, and he shouldered that because he cared more about me developing spiritually and becoming the man that he knew God created me to be versus me being upset with him a little. So thank God for that. You know, I'll tell you more about what it's like today. You know, I spent a lot of time after my sponsor died in treatment. That was really where my groove was, man. I really loved treatment. I got on the treatment committee. I chaired meetings for years, and I was a little angry when I had to rotate out of that position. But it was important, you know, that's spirit of rotation. And, you know, I got involved in that and sponsored a lot of men. And you know, during that time, at about 8 years sober, was where I was in a real squirrely spot. And I was very, very vulnerable, and I had a huge resentment. And I had a sponsee. I literally got to the place where I had called each of my sponsees and told them they probably needed to get another sponsor because I was probably going to drink. That's how bad it had got. And I wanted to make sure that they were on that beam of recovery, because I certainly wasn't. I was in spiritual relapse bad. I had a justified, in my mind, justified anger and resentment over another person. And it was killing me inside. And let me, you know, our book says, but let me just tell you from experience that there is no justifiable anger and resentment for an alcoholic if I want to live long, because that's going to take me out. The book says it'll take me quicker than anything. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. You know, all stems from me thinking that I know the way something should go, or the way something shouldn't go, or the way someone should behave, or the way they shouldn't behave, which it addresses in step 3, you know, in pages 61 through 63. I'm still running the show, but I don't think so. I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, but I usually don't think so, especially when I'm in self-will. I don't think so. I got these strange mental blank spots, and I can't see any of this stuff. And that's part of the spiritual malady. So I really have one choice. You know, I have 2 alternatives. I could go on to the bitter end, blotting out of my consciousness and being a drunk and hurting everybody and destroying lives around me and not be the man that God created me to be. Or I could simply accept some spiritual help and institute some daily practices. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's the beauty of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's all laid out. All I've got to do is inspect the tools and begin to implement them and practice them, and my life begins to change on its own. I become spiritually fit, and I can see things that I can't when I'm not spiritually fit. And so grateful for that. You know, through that process, I called one sponsee it was the last call. I knew it would be the most difficult. And he was actually a gentleman that was sponsored by my same sponsor that died tragically in a motorcycle accident. And I said, you know, I'm going to have to let you go. You need to find another sponsor. And he said, he paused for a minute. And I was waiting for his response. And I'm going to say it the best that I can, the way that I remember it. He said, that's not how this shit works. And excuse my French, but that's what he said. And he said, what's going on? And I confided in him, and he said, you've got to pray for this person, Scott. God knows you're lying. We both chuckled. And that chuckle started a process of me being willing to call and really get some more input from sponsorship and ask what I should do. You know what they told me? Go get back on that treatment committee, Scott. Go back to newcomer meetings. Go to 90 meetings in 90 days. 8 years sober. It was like I was getting sober all over again. Pray for this human being every day, whether you mean it or not, whether you feel like it or not. And also every time it comes to mind. Mix up the prayers on page 67 and 66 and 67 and 551 and 552, the concepts of those, basically asking everything you want for yourself to be given to that person, and also saying that prayer I mentioned a little earlier about God, help me see them as a spiritually sick child of yours, and save me from being angry. Show me how I might be able to be useful, helpful. You know, save me from show me how I might have the same tolerance, pity, and patience I cheerfully grant that little sick boy that I saw in the hospital bed. And I had to pray and pray and pray and pray and pray. You know, that in the book on 551 and 552, it says for 2 weeks. I'm here to tell you it was 2 years for me. So some are sicker than others. But the key is that if I'll continue to institute the tool and the practice, I'll get the result. And the beauty is I'm free from that. And here's the best part about that. in hindsight, and that's where I see my lessons in Alcoholics Anonymous. In hindsight, I see that during that 8 to 12 year period of my recovery was the most emotional and spiritual growth I've ever had in my life, I've ever had in my recovery. And I've grown spiritually and emotionally throughout the entire process, but not like that. And, you know, somewhere it remarks in our literature that pain is the touchstone to all spiritual growth. So, you know, the beauty of this thing is that I continue to practice these principles. And I can't practice these principles on my own power. That's the whole premise of this thing. I don't have that kind of power, but I know a guy, and there's one who has all power. That one to me is God. And you know, may we find him now. And thank God that I trust and ask for that power. You know, I feel that God's a gentleman. This is just my own take. God's a gentleman. He doesn't go anywhere he's uninvited. He doesn't stay anywhere he's not welcome. He's given us free will. And in order for him to barge in past that free will, it wouldn't no longer be free will. It'd be like semi-free will or something morphed and not free will. So in order for me to have God in my life and his power in my life, I've got to ask and invite God into that portion, whatever that portion is. I get to pause when I'm agitated. Guess what? When I'm agitated, I'm usually in self-will. So that's a great indicator. Blink and light going self-will, self-will, self-will. So all I got to do is pause, ask God, the one that has all the power, for the right thought or action. Constantly remind me that on my own self-will and free will, I'm not gonna operate correctly. I'm not running the show anymore. Thy will, not mine, be done. And again, I don't have to believe it. I don't have to think it'll work. How about I just try it? And I'm glad my sponsor pointed this out. I could try this like a science experiment. My misery is happily refundable. Why don't I try it repetitiously for a period of time? And if these things don't work and my life doesn't improve, literally, hey, throw it away. We don't do stuff around here that doesn't work in Alcoholics Anonymous. These were things I was told. And I really didn't have much argument for that. I'll tell you another one is that my sponsor challenged me to begin. I gave him all kinds of excuses why I couldn't pray and meditate in the morning. I jump out of bed, I run, I get ready, and I'm down the road. He said, how about setting your alarm clock 5 minutes earlier? I hit the snooze button. He said, put it across the room. Put your alarm clock across the room. Spend 5 minutes every day for 30 days. If it doesn't improve your life, throw it in the trash. I began to do that. That practice went from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 to 30 to an hour to 2 hours. Every morning I was waking up early, 4:30 in the morning. The only reason I tell you this is not to brag. It's to say how much I needed God. This is in my early sobriety, and that's some of the richest spiritual growth I've had. I still practice a good amount of time in the morning. I'm not calibrated properly unless I get calibrated with God right off the rip in the morning. I've got a journal. I journal thoughts that come. I ask for thoughts. I commune with God. I have my morning coffee with him and we talk. It's the best relationship. And I'm so grateful that my conception of God has completely changed and it's continuing to change. And that was something I felt was very unhealthy if my conception to God began or ever changed or continued to change. Today, I see it as something very healthy. The more that I remember this prayer, I'm going to share this. I heard a speaker say one time at the end of his talk, he said, God, help me to get to the place where I no longer need to forgive because I'm not offended to begin with. And that changed my conception of God. If a man can say something like that, how much more is God? These are things that pop in my head. And I don't think it's this old country boy coming up with this stuff. I think that me being connected to this power is allowing me to see things in a new way continually today. I'm so grateful for the things that have happened and the growth that I've experienced. And more so than that, you know, I grew up in Fort Myers, like I said. I transitioned, moved my family. Just a God story, total miracle. I don't even have time to tell it in this talk, but went to Tennessee and really felt the draw to that area. And very quickly during COVID, all the meetings in our areas really began to shut down. And my sponsor and I had a thought that we really needed a meeting. Looked at I believe it was the Tennessee memorandum at the time, and said a matter of life or death. So we approached a local pastor at a church, see if we could start an AA meeting there. And we started one using the format of our own home group out of Cape Coral, and just mirroring that same format with a few tweaks. But that started off as 3 to 5, went to 10 to 15 to 20. to 30. There's usually about 50 in attendance. That's not to brag. That's to say that watching God in a small community work in the lives of others, to see other people recover, to see them help others, this is an experience you must not miss. I assure you, this is fantastic stuff. My life is rich and full today. I can't even describe to you the blessing of being able to be an instrument of God's peace and be an instrument of helping people find God. I mean, that's really what this book is all about. It even says that. You know, I'm gonna end with this. I imagine a hand. You know, I had this picture one time where I had seen my sponsor's hand up in the air and a hand coming down out of the clouds, a big hand, and his hand was connected in that hand, and he grabbed my hand. And it seemed like forever. You know, in those dreams where you're trying to run or swim and you seem to go real slow, it seemed like forever him trying to connect my hand to God's hand. But as he was getting close, I realized that was the 12-step recovery process in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got my hand connected to God's hand. And once my hand connected to God's hand, my sponsor's hand went back out and my hand went out. And I've been trying to connect hands ever since. I don't have the power to get anybody sober. I don't have the power to get anybody drunk. But I'll tell you what, I certainly love introducing them to that power that I have found that's kept me sober all this time. Thanks for letting me share, guys. I think that's about all out of me.